Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema podcast. My name is Brian Scuttle. Thank you for joining me at www.sonic-cinema.com as well as the Sonic Cinema podcast YouTube channel. We continue on with the class of 1999 with one of the most controversial films of that year. It's a film that's still polarizing for a lot of reasons, and I'm going to be exploring some of those reasons with a filmmaker who's been on the podcast before. We were talking primarily about his work, but I'm pleased to be joined today to discuss this particular film by Jakob Billinski. Jacob, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me, Brian. It's good to be back.
So I remember I saw Fight Club like opening weekend when it opened in 1999. I had not read the novel that it's based off of, but I did really like the film, and was fascinating to read online because this was around the time that I started reading more online reviews of. It was interesting to read the very polarized responses to the film that critics were having, and this is a movie that it is one of the. I think it is one of the most significant films from that year, and it's amazing considering just how big this year is as far as significant films. I mean, and there are films that still very much have a life to them, and Fight Club is probably the one with arguably the biggest post-release life. What was your first experience with the movie?
Oh well, I totally agree with that perspective. Like, I think I maybe am a little biased. I've gotten a little bit of flack because people are like, "Really?" But this is actually my favorite film. And it's weird that it is, I guess, because like Hot on the Heels is a Bergman film as my number two. But like I don't know. It's just there's something about that film that at the time that I saw it, it just clicked with me. And I know, it's kind of like a lot of people I think could say that, because I know it has like definitely a cult following. Mm-hmm. I think it definitely has, like you said, controversially, it has a lot of people that are not the biggest fan of it, but I don't know. It worked for me so well. I saw it, like I can tell you, I'm like it. I remember October 15th, 1999, I was in Murray, Kentucky at Murray State University, and me and a bunch of friends went to the theater to see it. I was obsessed with that trailer because I just remember thinking, man, that looks so different and cool. And, I was like, oh, I was a big David Fincher fan at that time. I was like, oh, man, yeah, Seven in the Game. And, yeah, sure. And then I was like, oh, Brad Pitt and Edward Norton. And I was like, everybody was kind of like at a really good point in their career to where I was just like, oh, this feels like a really great combination and collaboration of just amazing talent. And went and saw it, and I just remember being numb in the theater afterwards. Like, what just happened? What did I see? Like, I hadn't had. I mean, it definitely had like films affect me, and like like I had been profoundly affected by several, obviously, since then. But there was just something about that experience in the theater where like I felt different afterwards, and I didn't really know why. And it was everything. It was the script and the themes, and then of course Fincher's direction, the cinematography, and the performances, and just like everything. Like I really have. It's on a short list for me. I don't care who agrees with me or not. Like on my short list of what I consider probably perfect films, at least for me. Where I don't know. I mean, but the thing is, it tricked me, because it's like I saw it 6 times in the theater. I'm not advocating for bootlegging at all, but I'm not afraid to admit I downloaded a pirated version as soon as I could, as soon as it was out of theaters, because I needed to see it again. And that was in that window where like you had to wait forever for something to come out on VHS to rent. It wasn't like now where it's going to be on Blu-ray in 3 months and you can buy it. Right. It was, and I was like, I need to see it again. And then it came back to like the dollar theaters, and so like I went and saw it again in the theater, and it came out on like VHS, and the Blu-ray, the DVD. Blu-ray wasn't a thing then; it wasn't even out. So I went to, like Blockbuster and rented the VHS and like just kept renting it over and over. When they had a used copy for sale, I bought it.
Yeah.
And, like I just kept watching that. And then eventually the DVD came out and I bought it. And then, like I watched it again last night for the first time in a while. And I realized I think I own like 6 or 7 copies of it because like anytime they put out like a new cover, I'm just such a fan of it. And I'm like, there's a new like steelbook or a new cover. So I'm like, it's the same damn disc, but I'm just going to keep buying it because it's like, that's my little Fight Club corner. And going back to what I was saying, sorry, I'm very excited about this film, but it tricked me, excuse me, and several of my friends, because afterwards, I think we completely missed the point of the movie, because our first instinct afterwards, where we were on such like this, like overloaded adrenaline, masculine, like just film high, where we were like, do you want to go get sparring gear and go out to the soccer fields at midnight and beat the crap out of each other? And we were like, yep. So one of my friends had sparring gear, and we went out and we fought and beat the living shit out of each other. Like, I remember my roommate was peeing blood the next day. I'm not kidding. It was, we were stupid. We were freshmen in college, and we were just like, it's the same thing as like, I guess if you go see Gone in 60 Seconds, you're like, I want to drive really fast or something like that. But it was just, we were just pumped up. And it's like, and I went and saw it again like the next day. A buddy of mine, actually, at Murray, when we were walking into the theater, he was walking out of the screen right before us, and we're like, what'd you think? He's like, dude, I can't even. And we're like, do you want to go? And he's like, yeah. He turned right back around, bought a ticket, and went and saw it again with us. And I was like, oh man, what am I in for here? But like, and then like the more you see it, the more you start to see the layers. Is like, it kind of presents as this like overly like, breaking down like the concept of what is masculine and what is not, like, but it kind of playing with and deconstructing stereotypes to where you think that it's just about like, oh yeah, like brute force, beat each other. But it's like the movie is incredibly anti-violence, and it's like we completely missed the point that it's like, that's not the answer. Like if you walk out thinking like we thought, the movie tricked you. And it was that was on us as shitty audience members. That wasn't the movie's fault. And then I realized, I'm like, oh my God, this thing is so brilliant. And I stopped counting. It's like, it's one of the few films I was like trying to keep track of, but I stopped counting when I got to my 50th viewing. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it, but it still is, every time I watch it, it's like on a very short list of films that every time I watch it, I still catch something new, no matter how tiny. And I'm just like, holy shit, how did I not catch that before? And and the thing is, it has nothing to do with the twist, because, come on, at this point, if you haven't seen it, like, spoiler alert, but like once you get to once the twist is revealed, you can never have that again. It's like, it's up there with like a 7 or a Usual Suspects or something, or it's like, like once you get that first viewing and what the end game is, like, you're never going to get that again. But there's so many other little moments, like when you start to realize, wait, how did I not catch this before? Because it's so telegraphed, And I hadn't read the book. I went and got the novel and read it afterwards, because I was kind of obsessed with it. But have you read the book since?
I've not.
I guess
no. I've not read the book. So yeah,
it is. I guess part of it is probably a little bit my bias with the film, but I would claim it among my favorite novels. But the ending, and it's funny because Chuck Palahniuk, he even said that he thought Jim Ull's screenplay improved. What Fincher did with the film, and Ull did with the script, like, their story on screen, he's like, that is greater than the book, because I'll be honest, I love the book, but the ending of the book sucks. Some people like it, but it is not good, and the film works so much better. And I'd say, aside from being a fantastic adaptation, it's on a short list of films that I think improve upon the original material, which is rare. But yeah, no, my first experience was, I guess, not to be too hyperbolic, but kind of world changing for me. And that was in my very formative years, where I hadn't quite realized that I wanted to be a filmmaker. I mean, I was obsessed with movies, and like, I'd made like little like student short films, but like I hadn't tried, let's try and do this for real. But so obviously it was very influential to me at that time. But yeah, no, it hit me. I guess to quote Edward Norton's character, the narrator, what he says to Marla at the end, that film met me at a very strange time in my life, and it worked.
Well, and it's funny because of the fact that I mean, hearing your enthusiasm about the movie, the second you saw it and the experience that you had, it reminded me when I first saw The Crow, which for a long time was my favorite movie of all time. It's still one of my favorite movies of all
Oh,
time,
it's
and it's basically
wonderful.
one of those movies. It it's it's a movie that once you see it, something about your brain just rewires, and it's something it that experience. And yeah, you can't always put into words immediately. You have to keep going back and keep going back and keep going back. And it's like
Hmm.
your experience with Fight Club is very much the same experience I had with The Crow, where it's like I unfortunately I saw it on like the last day the discount theater had it, so I
Hmm.
had to wait until it came out in video
Yeah.
to
And wasn't
see it
that just
again.
grueling back then? That where you're just like, I
Oh
want to
God,
see it
yes.
again. It was
Oh
terrible.
God,
Like
yes.
like modern audiences, and especially like kids growing up, like with how entertainment is consumed nowadays. So I'm sorry for cutting you off, but
No,
like
that's
that's
fine.
just that's such an interesting thing to me. Like they're so spoiled. It's like you don't know. I remember waiting a year. I think it was at least around a year for Jurassic Park to come out on VHS. Like
Oh
in like
yeah,
after it was 93 that came out, right?
yeah.
Like yeah,
Heck,
and like
I
that turnaround time, and now it's like they just did like a re-release for Avengers Endgame, and I'm like, you could pre-order it. It comes out on Blu-ray and 4K like in a month, and it's
well,
just like some people, it's almost like, why wait for the theater? I'm like, no, please still go to the theater, see it
I
on a
have
big screen. But
yeah, I have very specific. So I have very basic feelings about the Endgame re-release because first of all, it wasn't a damn re-release. My theater
I
still
know,
had it, so it was just a
yeah,
matter of
they
changing the
just tacked on
booking
extra stuff.
to have that extra footage on it. That's all
Yeah,
it
here's
was.
the thing. The extra footage, I went and saw it. It wasn't. I know this isn't about Fight Club right now, but like
Yeah, I know.
it was not. It wasn't like earth shattering or anything. But here's the thing. I'd only seen it the one time, and I wanted to see it in the theater one more time
Yeah,
before it left anyway. So I was
yeah.
like, you know what? Even if you didn't have anything else, it was more of just an extra motivation to, okay, we'll go. And also, I'm like, if other people go and it gets enough money to overthrow Avatar for the all time, then absolutely please do that, because what? But that's just
Yeah.
me. Anyway,
No, that no, but no, that but yeah, and I heck, when you brought up Jurassic Park, I saw it at a discount theater over a year after it was originally released.
yeah,
So it's like I remember that, but yeah, I mean
yeah, it
you're
was just the
absolutely
worst.
yeah, I mean you're absolutely right about that window. To get back to Fight Club though, it's like you not only did you talking about your first experience bring up my first experience with the movie. It's still one of my very favorite movies of all time. But
Hmm.
your experience with it, your initial impressions with it, basically point to two very popular narratives with regards to the movie, and that is the fact that you saying it's your favorite movie of all time, one of your favorite movies of all time, like it feels like for a generation that's grown up with Fight Club and seen Fight Club, that's a very standard refrain. Now, honestly, I don't blame
Hmm.
you because it
No,
is
no,
a
no.
brilliant film. It's a
Yeah, and that's what
brilliant
I have to
film.
defend sometimes, is because it's almost like some people are like, well, that's kind of a cliche pick. I'm like,
Yeah.
sorry, that's a personal decision, but yeah, I totally, yeah, I get that.
But and also the idea that when you first saw it, you kind of misread what the point was. And I even myself, I'll gladly admit that it's like to a certain extent I did too. Like I didn't now granted I didn't go out and beat the living shit out of my friends with it
Yeah,
because
we had
after it.
sparring gear. Everybody was, but yeah.
But at the same time, it's like I was I understood what I felt what Tyler Durden was getting at in that
Hmm.
movie, and it's like yes, that's exactly it. I understood the anti-consumerism. I understood the idea that it's essentially about how it and it's funny because this and another Fox movie from earlier this year, it's got a healthy cult in it. Office Space. Both of those movies basically
Hmm.
talk about how the evolution of corporate America has basically devalued people.
Exactly.
And it's like that's basic at its core, that's what Fight Club has going on. But
Hmm.
like you said, it's also about this reinvention of what masculinity, this redefinition of what masculinity is. And
Right.
for the most part, you start to think, you listen to what Tyler Durden says, and a broken clock is still right twice a day. And to a certain extent, even as toxic as Tyler, as the older you get, the more you realize just how toxic Tyler's worldview is. You
Yeah.
also, there's still some points that are perfectly valid.
Exactly. It's like the narrator says, like the scene where he takes the clerk out back of the convenience store and is like, telling him, if you're not on your way to being veterinary in 6 weeks, you will be dead, Raymond. Like whenever but he doesn't have bullets in the gun. That whole scene. Yeah. At the end, narrator says you had to give it to him. It started to kind of make sense in a Tyler kind of way, and you're like, this guy is like you said, toxic and terrible. But every once in a while, you're like, but fuck yeah. I mean, it kind of connects, and that's one of the brilliant things to me about the movie is it is such a subtle. It's okay. It's not subtle. It's definitely not a subtle movie, but the way that it's it's telling you to look over here, but then sort of sneaking in the back door. It's like this kind of subtly cerebral mind fuck. And I don't mean the twist, but it's it's really feeding you stuff that you're not thinking about because you're like, fight. Like I said, I walked out of that movie and you're from that moment, where it's it brings up all kinds of really profound questions about growth and personal identity and relationships and masculinity and sexuality and it's basically kind of a weird box, maybe a Pandora's box of what is your place in the world, your own identity, and this idea he says we're an entire generation of men raised by women. I wonder if another woman is really what we need. And the whole thing is it's a film about men that grew up with absent fathers, it's this idea of someone that grew up in a broken family and trying to find their definition of what is a man, which, is relevant in 1999, is relevant in 2019, is always going to be relevant. And I'm, not just men, but anyone as a human, as a person, what is your place in the world? Who are you? And I think it brings up some really kind of, disturbingly profound questions, but it's masked by come on, at the end, that first fight when Tyler stands up and Brad Pitt is come on in the best shape of his life, and I'm all of a sudden I'm I want to start doing sit-ups, and then I see that I'm I think I want to start smoking, and I'm is this movie a bad influence? And I'm who cares? But I mean, yeah, but it's it makes you, it's this weird thing that is sort of it's kind of, I don't want to say self-reflexive, but it's making fun of marketing and advertising, but the movie is almost selling you this sort of anti-hero, kind of dangerous lifestyle, and portraying it as kind of alluring and sexy, and it's how much can you know about yourself if you've ever been in a fight? It's well, no, violence is wrong, but also it's that's a good question, if you really stop and think about it. And then it's he's like, oh, is it when they get on the bus and they look at the Armani ad and, or the Gucci ad or whatever. And you see the underwear models there. And he's like, is that what a man's supposed to look like? And he's like, self-improvement is masturbation. Now self-destruction. And you're sort of is it good to hit rock bottom? And it's of course not. But it's it's making you think about these things. And I don't know, as someone that was sort of your post-adolescence, after, going through all the confusing issues of growing up and puberty and going, graduating and then going into college and sort of what do I do next? It's that you kind of feel that scene. I don't know, I really connected with that scene where the narrator's sitting there and Tyler's taking a bath and he's he's talking about his dad and he's I didn't know what to do, so I called up my dad. He said, after I graduated, Dad, now what? I don't know. Go get a job. Okay, so now I'm 30. I call him up. Dad, now what? I don't know. Get married. And it's he's sort of just figuring out what do you do next? And it's we can all kind of relate to that. And I'm going on a total tangent here, but I remember there were a lot of conversations and debates about that there was sort of like a thick homoerotic thread in the film, and that it was sort of like a love story between or something between like Tyler and the narrator.
Yeah.
And I'm like, first off, I'm not going to discount that, because I definitely think that there are a lot of over undertones, just whatever, it's themes in the movie. But the point that I really find intriguing, and there is like, looking at that and saying, yeah, it's like, it's really kind of a story about learning to love yourself, because that's sort of what, to me, the narrator and Tyler's relationship, because again, spoiler alert, they're the same person. If you haven't seen it by now, why are you listening to this? Come on.
I know.
But like,
exactly.
But it's like, that whole thing of the narrator needed Tyler to be able to get to whatever the next stage in his life is going to be. Like he says, Marla, to Marla, you met me at a very strange time in my life. And it's like, you used to get those little flashes, those flash frames of where he starts to see Tyler before he actually manifests. And remember how lost he is whenever Tyler leaves him. When he's like, Tyler went away, Tyler's gone. And everybody's like, you're a fucking crazy person. You're Tyler. What are you talking about? But it's like, to him, it's like this loss of this identity of oneself. And I find that kind of tragically beautiful, because at the end, when he realizes, oh, the gun's not in your hand, the gun's in my hand. And he like Tyler just told him, I will carry you through this kicking and screaming as always. And in the end, you will thank me, or whatever that line is. And then, he's like, hey, it's just you and me, friends. And he's like, my eyes are open, shoots himself. And then Tyler goes away. And it's like, he shoots himself in the cheek, like it comes out the jaw, like the neck. So it's like he survives the gunshot. But when Tyler falls down, there's the open hole in the back of his head, because that's what he needed. That was his intent, was to kill Tyler. So of course, like the wounds are in different places, but it's because he doesn't need him anymore. And it's sort of like, you've accepted yourself. And it's like, to me, it's like this weird, dark odyssey of learning to accept who you are, flaws and all. And I really think that it's kind of a love story, but it's this darkly beautiful story of acceptance of yourself, of the world around you, of, you want to rebel, you want to fight, you're full of teen angst, and like, Nicolas Cage says in The Rock, I'm 16 and angry at my father syndrome and all that shit. And, you're just like, I don't want to be a pawn, like, like this idea of like rejecting consumerism, rejecting, like what's being sold to you, what you're told to think is cool, what you're told to think is sexy and attractive, what you're told of what you want to be when you grow up, or like, like what to do in the world. And it's like, like that haiku he writes about, being like a worker drone bee, the queen is their slave, and all like that whole bit. Like it's just, I don't know. It's I like, there's so much to unpackage in the movie. Like, it's 20 years old at this point, which what the hell, how did that happen? Yeah. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen it. I just watched it again last night, and it's like I fell in love with it all over again. I didn't need to watch it again to be able to talk with you about it, but I was like, it's been a minute, let me watch it again. But I was like, yeah, it's all still there, and it's all feels fresh, and it's like every time feels like the first time, because that movie doesn't feel 20 years old. It feels weirdly relevant today. I think that it's going to, I think for audiences today catching it for the first time, I think it's going to strike a different chord, because the world has definitely evolved and changed, just like, society and humans, and like, and again, all the stuff is talking about like marketing and everything, and consumerism and rejecting, I guess like expectations, it's like, okay, what's life? Right. Well, you wake up, you go to work, you come home, you have your place, you own your shit, and then you go to bed and wake up and do it again. And it's like kind of depressing the way it paints it, which it's weird that you mentioned Office Space, because I never really thought about it, but there's sort of like an interesting correlation between those two movies. You're right, where it's like, I mean, I would argue Fight Club's kind of a dark comedy, but one's more an overt comedy.
No,
I know I'm. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. No, I mean, and the thing is, that actually leads me to a point that I was about to make, to get away from specifically Fight Club in general into 1999. I always actually, at the time, I always sort of linked this, Office Space, and American Beauty together, because all of them have similar have similar narratives about basically they're men looking for ways to center themselves after they start seeing through the BS of their own worlds. And all three of the and
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
basically they take themselves down these specific paths, and really they're very self-destructive paths, but they ultimately lead themselves towards more of an inner peace. Let's There's a lot more going on in 1999 than just those three movies doing that. The Matrix did it. Being John Malkovich did it.
I would argue Magnolia too.
Magnolia, which I haven't seen in 20 years, and I will.
Yeah. I mean, a little bit, like
rewatching
at least
this.
like not all about that, but I'd say those themes are definitely in there.
Well, and certainly the arc with Tom Cruise's character certainly.
Yeah. Well, and John C. Reilly, like his character about like needing to feel adequate, like like the whole bit where he's like find the gun. It's like I mean that was a really thick theme that year. I didn't really stop and connect that.
I mean, it's fascinating. It's been fascinating rewatching all of these movies and realizing, holy shit, this was more prevalent than I even realized in 1999. And I always I knew it was prevalent because of the way at least those three movies dealt with it. But the fact of the matter is, there's so many more that dealt with, seeing through artifice in our world versus what reality is. And I mean, that's completely a part of Fight Club because, as we've discussed, Tyler Durden is a figment of the narrator's imagination. He is basically how he is basically how the narrator wants to see himself.
Yeah, he even says he's like I look how you look, like you want to look. I fuck how you want to fuck. I am free in all the ways that you are not. And it's like, yeah, of course, it's like you create your own perfect version of yourself or what you want to be.
Yeah. And this is like, and this is one of the few movies that really, it's funny because I actually had a podcast recorded earlier about a completely unrelated movie, but it's still part of 1999, The Mummy. And I point out that the narration at the beginning of that movie is really over-explanatory, and it's like, show me, don't tell me. The narration in this movie is some of the best I've ever heard. And it's because of the fact that it's so much a part of it's so much about what's going on in the narrator's head. That has to be the case.
Yeah, you remember Adaptation?
Oh God,
remember?
Yes, I love that.
You remember? Yeah, oh, it's brilliant. But remember that whole bit where he's sitting there in the writing class, and the guy's talking about, it's like, don't use voiceover narration. It's so lazy of your character. And I remember thinking, I don't entirely disagree with you, but Fight Club though, because it so well, and that's hard to do.
Well,
yeah, exactly.
Adaptation as well.
Exactly, but I mean, which is kind of the fun joke, because it's like, but the movie we're watching. But my first thought, again, I'm sorry, like my first thought was, the movie I'm watching, but I was like, Fight Club worked really well. So
no, you're absolutely right that this is a dark comedy, and I mean, this is probably my favorite Edward Norton performance, and it's definitely up there for Brad Pitt. Like, Brad Pitt is just...
I'm not going to fight you on that.
Ridiculously funny in this movie.
Oh, yeah, no, their timing is just perfect, man. Like, and it's so quotable. And, like, Pitt and Norton's chemistry, and both of them and Helena Bonham Carter's chemistry, and just, like it just works so beautifully. It's like, I mean, it's perfect casting. It really is. Like, it's like, I try and picture, so-and-so could play the role. I'm like, I can't. And it's like,
I mean, you really could not pick better actors for those roles. I mean, and it's one, like you mentioned Fincher earlier, and it's like, you have Seven, you have The Game, and then he comes out with this, and it's like,
I skipped over Alien 3, but that's fine.
Most people do, and there's valid reasons for that. But I mean, Seven was his big breakout, and then you had The Game, which I think people are finally starting to come around on and see.
Yeah, that one deserves.
That movie is.
that deserved a bigger following earlier. But I mean, but yeah, it was sort of like this little sleeper gem, where I was like, when you see it, you're like, oh, that's great. But I'm like, yeah, it didn't connect widely like Seven did at the time. Right. But which is why everything was like from the director of Seven.
Yeah.
But
no, and the thing is, it's like you mentioned, you mentioned the homoerotic. You mentioned the homoerotic undertones that a lot of people see.
Yeah, because I mean, I've read a lot of debates on that, like in reviews and everything, and I think it actually kind of got, I mean, like I remember that was something that people picked up on a lot, and I think kind of actually championed it for. I could be wrong. I remember seeing some thinking that it was very good, and some people thinking that it was problematic, but it was definitely in the discussion.
Yeah. And the thing is, that's absolutely true. And that's one of the things that when I did the rewatch for this episode, I definitely, picked up on the fact that it's like, talking about American Beauty and Office Space again, it's like all three of those, they have female characters that are basically part of the protagonist's sort of personal salvation. So you've got May Suveri for Kevin Spacey's character. You have Jennifer Aniston for Ron Livingston's character in Office Space. But it's funny because this one, you do have Tyler starting out in that role. But by the end, and we'll start to get into this, Marla takes that over. The more
Oh, yes, she does. And it's... Oh, go ahead, sorry.
The more that the narrator realizes, oh shit, why the hell is, what the hell are we doing? Like, the more he starts to question Tyler, the more he realizes it's like Tyler's wrong about a lot of things. And the way Tyler's wrong about a lot of things is dangerous. And it's dangerous for me, it's dangerous for society in general. And it's when he ultimately breaks with Tyler that he starts to realize Marla is more important to him than he realizes.
Yeah, which is so interesting for, I guess, specifically from the viewer's perspective, because anytime we've seen any development, it had been Tyler, Brad Pitt, and Marla, Helena Bonham Carter. So then we don't really get that transition until well into the third act, whenever the narrator when Tyler reveals to him that they're the same person, and he's like, "You're fucking Marla." He's like, "Well, technically you're fucking Marla, but it's all the same to her," And it's like that whole bit. And then they get to, and then one of his first things is to run and have meet her at that restaurant with Ed, the lead singer from Live. I was really excited about that cameo, by the way, because I was really into them back then. But they whenever he tells her she's in danger and sends her on the bus, and they kind of have that breakup, and she's like, "Tyler, you're the worst thing that ever happened to me." And then just he sends her off. But it's almost like having that breakup of a relationship conversation when we never really got any relationship development of those two, of Edward Norton and her, of the narrator. So it was a weird transition for that to happen, because you're right. It's like she kind of at first it's Tyler, he's the kind of, I guess, object of his affection, because it's he's like, you're who I literally who he wants to be. He created him. And it, again, I still think it's kind of about learning to love yourself, but it's that transitions to this, however temporary, however permanent partner, in Marla. And, it's they're both kind of so messed up that they kind of are good for each other, because they're both crazy.
Well, and you sort of get the impression, you can probably get the impression that chances are they're not going to last for a lot of reasons.
Sure.
But yeah, by the end of the movie... But
it doesn't matter.
No, yeah, because by the end of the movie, Marla really is what the narrator needs. And it's
exactly,
even if it doesn't go beyond the end of the movie, at least by that final shot, he realizes he's been searching for the wrong thing.
Right.
He's been thinking about the wrong things in the wrong way.
Yeah. And it's so, I love that you specifically mentioned the final shot, because I realized last night that the final shot of the film is hands down one of my favorite final shots in all of cinema history. Like, you know, just the two of them standing there slowly turning their heads to one another, holding hands perfectly spaced apart. It's just such meticulous composition and direction of, like, you know, the timing there with the buildings exploding in the background.
Yeah.
And it's not great, not just because it has the audacity to show a giant dick as the last frame before, you know, we roll the credits, which at the same time you're sort of like, and it's like, Tyler's not really gone. He edited the film. Like, self-reflexive humor. Good job. Anyway, but that shot's so beautiful because it's these two broken souls literally standing on the edge of the world watching the collapse of society. And I'm like, how epic and just tragically beautiful is that? I don't give a fuck if they last. It doesn't matter because they're perfect for each other in that moment. And it's so... I mean, like, don't get me wrong. They're damaged. They're broken. They're not good people. But it's like it's ugly, but it's such a beautiful moment. Mm-hmm. Like I love that shot, not just because of, like, visually how great that shot is, but just that moment for those characters, and that's the final note set perfectly to Where Is My Mind. And it's like everything about the ending of that movie gives me chills thinking about it.
Oh yeah, and the fact of the matter is, it's like ultimately that is what, you know, I mean, that is ultimately what's important, is living in the moment as opposed to trying to live, you know, I mean, obviously trying to create a future, trying to build a future for yourself is important, but not at the expense of the moment. And that is
exactly,
like, there's so much psychological study that you can really do with this. Like the chemical burn scene, there's real insight there in terms of how to get through trauma and pain. Mm-hmm. You know, arguably there's more than the support groups at the beginning of the film where the narrator meets Marla. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where it's like you see him, it is the narrator's trip towards rock bottom. And, you know, you start to see, and it's after the car accident that he really starts to, even though he feels like he's started this sort of rebirth towards his new self before this, it's after the car accident where Tyler's just gone. Like, you don't see Tyler again until the narrator has figured out what's going on.
And how heartbreaking is that? Like, did you feel that too? Like that moment where, like, he's abandoned by Tyler, like there's that line of, like, you know, like, my father left me, Tyler left me. And it's just sort of like, you're just back to being lost in the world, man. Because, like, he was getting jealous of, like, it's weird because he was going down a different rabbit hole. He's so jealous of all the attention that Tyler's getting, like, from Angel Face, Jared Leto, and, like, all the other Project Mayhem characters and everything. But it's like you're jealous of a different version of yourself, and it's like, and that makes him sad. You know, it's like it's weird. I mean, because it's like he just keeps getting lost inside himself, and, like, I think anybody that's really struggled ever with, like, depression or anxiety, it's like, if you can watch that movie and not connect on some level, I don't understand that.
Oh yeah,
personally.
I mean, I definitely still feel that. I mean, you know, it's like I mean, I am somebody who's struggled with depression and anxiety. It's like and I've been really starting to deal with it for a decade, and it's like I know that and I know that for me personally, when I had those instances too where I felt like I was getting better, and then for some reason, and then an even harder rock bottom hit. You know, I thought I had already hit rock bottom, and, you know, I was creeping myself back up, and then all of a sudden the bomb drops out again, and it's even worse.
Right.
And so, yeah, I've definitely been there, and it's like you see that arc in the narrator where it's like once he first meets Tyler, it's like his view on life starts to change, so his view on himself starts to change. He starts to think, okay, I can be more independent than I really am right now, and I'm doing well. But what he doesn't realize is it's kind of a placebo, because it's only going to help you to a certain extent before the bomb drops out again.
Right. And you know, thinking a little bit more about that, because like that was one of the big themes to me that stuck out, is like, you know, yeah, I think this thing is sort of a weird psychoanalysis of, you know, depression and anxiety, and just like, you know, like a tortured mind, and, you know, like how it literally is just realizing that that is your brain attacking you. I mean, think about the first damn shot of the movie. Okay, the movie literally starts on what I'm going to call is like the movie starts on a panic attack. You know, like in the middle of a brain with this moment of tension and panic because a gun is in his mouth, and we, you know, it's that fight or flight. It's like this neurosis or mental firing. I'm saying my words wrong here, but it's like, you know, his synapses are just like going off, and you see like these electrical beams going down, like, you know, and then it pulls out of a pore, and you see the sweat, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, there's a gun in this character's mouth. And it's like, that is your starting point for this story.
Yeah.
It's not about starting at the end. It's about starting at that mental trigger, that tiny firing in the brain. And then, you know, like when we meet him, he's, without coming out and saying, he's borderline suicidal. You know, it's like, so dark and lost, and just going to the doctor, just, please, I have pain. Can't you give me something? And he's like, you want to see pain, go and see these support groups. And then he gets addicted to the support groups. And it's like, where does he find peace and release? In being around people that are suffering. And it's weird because he's like, if I don't say anything, people assume the worst. And you could sit here and argue all you want that it's like, that's sick, and that's preying on people that have real problems. But it's like, that line hits me so hard whenever he first meets Marla, when she's like, why do you do it? He's like, I don't know. It's just when people think you're dying, they really listen instead of just waiting for their turn to talk.
Yeah.
And it's like finally being heard. It's like someone paying attention to you, because when you're down, I mean, like everybody's, you know, every depression and anxiety for each individual, I think, is kind of unique, but there are definitely like patterns and themes. And the idea is realizing that your brain is lying to you. And this literally, your brain, Tyler, is lying to you the whole fucking movie. Yeah. It's like, you know, he's like manifested incarnate there. And like, you know, just to think, what, like, again, going back to the whole, like, where is my place in the world, and like, you know, what have I, what, and then he meets Marla, and then he finds these support groups, and then he meets Tyler, and it's like all of a sudden you're kind of excited and you have purpose again, because it's like when you're that low, it's like you feel invisible. It's either you're invisible, or at least for me, again, I can only speak for me, like you're invisible, or like you don't want to be seen, because it's too painful. You're like, please don't look at me. And it's like, you know, and that's what he is. He's kind of like shrouded in his little corner in the world. And then literally his brain, lying to him, turns his world upside down. Because think about his character when we first meet him. Who is the narrator? Love that he doesn't have a name. No, Cornelius, Rupert, whatever, you know, like Travis, you know, like, okay, what is he? He is a worker bee.
Yeah.
Not unlike Ron Livingston's character. He goes, you know, into Office Space. He goes to work and hates his job. He has insomnia and he can't sleep. So he doesn't even find peace or solace in his home. The one place that you should, when you carve out your corner in the world, no matter how unhappy you are out there, you should be able to be happy in your home. That's I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it, like that's your ultimate safe space, you know, like that's your place of peace.
Yeah.
And he can't even get rest. So it's just like this constant, like, weird flux of existing for no reason, meaningless and monotonous, and over and over and over. And it's like, what happens? His split personality blows up his apartment. Because like he's obsessed, you know, like with the IKEA nesting instinct. You know, it's like, you know, like the way he has his apartment set up, he's so meticulous. It's like, literally, this is somebody that is probably extremely OCD. I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably a germaphobe, and just like, you know, everything has to be neat in its right place. Blow that up all to shit, and where does he end up? With his split personality, living in the biggest shithole in the world on Paper Street, with like the paper peeling off the walls. It feels like dog shit smeared everywhere, just because everything has that putrid, sick yellow brown color. Good color grading, guys, by the way. And then, but then, you know, like in this mattress that's like, where was that taken from? With no sheet, with everything leaking and turning the water off, and you know, like them just sitting there and like, you know, with the brown water coming out, you can't even brush your teeth, or like, you know, no excuse me, no concept or sense of hygiene at all. And that is the polar opposite of who he is as a person. It's like he's telling that police officer, look, this is very serious. That stuff in the apartment, that wasn't just some stuff that got blown up in that apartment. That was me. You know, it's like, that is who he was. So his definition, it's like not unlike, now I'm thinking about like Kevin Spacey's character having a mental breakdown in I guess we shouldn't be talking about Kevin Spacey now, but you know, but his character in what happened with like him, how he just sort of like broke down and you know, like had this midlife crisis and just was like, fuck it, you know. Same with Office Space. Okay, now I'm really seeing a lot of threads here. You're right, but like he literally he has this. It's not a midlife crisis. This is like a mental break, literally, where he splits into two, like when a cell just goes into two, and like, you know, it's like he just divides, and he has this new life that could not be more uncomfortable for who he was before. So it's like, but weirdly, look how comfortable he is in this new environment, which is the worst place. As someone who's like deals with like, you know, OCD, and I'm an intense germaphobe, I look at that house and I'm like, I don't even want to be on that set. It's so gross to look at.
God,
but
no.
it's like but that becomes comfortable to him. And it's like, you know, and Tyler is like, you don't give a shit, you know, like he's just like, you know, whatever. I mean, like all I could think is that scene where like anytime you see the bathroom, I'm like, oh God, that's just the grossest. Yeah. But I mean, like everything, like in that house, I'm like, you know, it's just disgusting. But it's, I think that I mean, the aside from just great set design there, like just that visual of going from his apartment or his condo to what he ends up as is just such a stark contrast. And I don't know, like I think it's. Well, I'm a little lost in the weeds on my point, but it's like I just think coming back to like, you know, like dealing of like healing and, you know, overcoming like you know, insecurities or any kind of like mental disorder, which is what this movie is all about. It's really unique, because I've seen films deal with those themes in a lot of different ways. I can't think of another film that deals with this the way that Fight Club does.
Oh God, no. I certainly can't think of it. And the thing is, it's like what you're saying as far as like the very split personality. Basically, the narrator's trapped. The narrator's trapped, and Tyler is setting him free. It's like that's basically what happens when he blows up his apartment. Is that the what was keeping the narrator trapped in his routine, that was it was a creature comfort, but at the same time it was making him miserable as well. All of a sudden he's free to do what he wants, even though for him it's hard to see that at first. And it really, and you know, God forbid, nobody wants to see that happen. Nobody wants, you know.
Oh no, of course.
You don't want to see that happen to yourself, but at the same time, the second you realize your life is more free, you're more free to do something than you thought you were. That's a liberating feeling.
Yeah, well, it's that line. It's only after we've lost everything that we're free to do anything. I mean, like, come on.
Yeah.
Got to be one of the best lines I've ever heard. But like, yeah, that's exactly what you're talking about. Like, it's like once you hit bottom, it's like, and that's weirdly enough, that is kind of one of the most important and strongest messages in the movie. Is like, you know, he's like, hey, how much can you know? He's like, come on, you know, hitting rock bottom is not a retreat. It's not a goddamn seminar. Like when they're in the car, and he's like, why do you think I blew up your condo? And it's like this whole idea of hitting rock bottom. It's like, that's awful. Why would you want to hit bottom? But then you think about it, you're like, it can't get any worse.
No.
It only can get better. And there's something weirdly comforting about that. I mean, Tyler, don't get me wrong, is going about it in the worst, most like, and like, just,
absolutely.
Like head mainlining towards anarchy, like the most toxic way possible. But it's not wrong. You know, it's like, you know, saying like, you know, well, it can't get any worse. It's like, well, don't say that. It's like, well, no, really, the idea of bottom is like, it can't. You're, you know, like, so you will survive. And that's weirdly affirming. And I think that's something that the movie kind of like masks in a good way, because it's there without being in your face.
Right. And the fact of the matter is, it's like, no, it's Tyler is basically the textbook definition of toxic masculinity. Like,
absolutely.
He is the definition of toxic masculinity. But as you
Even to the
said,
point where we kind of idolize it in a weird way because they make it cool, and you're like, no, 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 no.
Right. And I certainly felt like that to a certain extent when I was younger and saw it. I certainly don't feel that way now, but like you said, there's a level of truth to what he's saying at its core. Because it's like you really do have to you feel like once you realize you have nothing to lose, once you realize there's no place further that you can go that's lower than where you are at now, that should free you up to
there's power in
to
that,
do whatever you want.
Exactly. And maybe don't start an underground fight club that evolves into a terrorist organization, but I guess whatever.
Well, and the funny thing is, it's like if you talk about the plot of the movie, it's essentially how to create a cult. Like that's
the cult mentality.
It's basically, and Tyler's creating a cult, and he's basically
they keep saying army, but it's a cult.
Yeah, it is. And he's preaching, an ideology over self, and it's like that's when you start to realize that's when us as the audience should start to realize it's like, wait a minute, Tyler is not really. I think I'm not evaluating Tyler properly here. It's like
okay,
you're not looking at this properly, so.
No, totally. And you're verging on a topic that I kind of wanted to bring up, and I'm going to do very carefully here. Okay. But the idea of because it is about building a cult, and the idea of setting up something that is, because it really started off what was it? Started off with Tyler and the narrator just fighting each other because they felt liberated by it. And then it was really just him beating himself up. So yay. But then other guys were like, wait a second, hang on. What are you doing in the parking lot? Oh wait, can I join in? And then it kind of grows, and it sort of like spreads like this disease, but not really like a disease. Spreads because it's a need that people are nobody does this. Nobody hang on, this is a release that I need. It's like the dark version of discovering yoga or something. It's this makes me feel better about something in my life, but maybe that's not a good correlation. But but then it's but he eventually becomes something bigger. He's Fight Club was the beginning. Now it's Project Mayhem. Now it's bigger. And when he's says they start recruiting applicants, and everybody comes in and they start doing destroy a piece of corporate art, start a fight, you're going to have to lose, or it's oh, you're now a terrorist organization giving out commands. And it's it evolves to something toward the end where when Tyler leaves, and it's that scene just stuck with me so much. After Tyler does it, it does that fade in and out of black, and he's talking about, and you'll see tiny figures punching corn, laying strips of venison on the abandoned superhighway. His whole vision of, I messed up the quote, but his whole vision of the future of the world, the way he sees society's downfall, which feels very mid Planet of the Apes storyline or something. But you've got, but then the narrator comes down the next day and it's Tyler's gone, but Project Mayhem's still going. They're still building soap and making dynamite and all this shit and everything. And he's just walking around drinking vodka, just morose. But and then Bob dies, which is this huge turning point when Bob gets shot. And he's like, you idiots, you're running around in ski masks trying to blow shit up. What do you think was going to happen? And they're like, we are, and that whole bit of, no, he has a name. He's my friend. Well, we have no names. No, his name is Robert Paulson.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I understand. In death, a member of Project Mayhem has a name. His name is Robert Paulson. They start chanting it. And it's this idea of you have kicked a snowball down the mountain that you can't stop now because it is an avalanche. And it's this idea of creating something that you no longer have control, which is such an interesting theory of someone in this literal sense, creating a cult, and it becomes something bigger than you can control. Or if you want to get, thinking about our themes that we talked about earlier, but maybe the idea of their mission statement, this isn't what we meant to do, and that's what he's saying. He's this is not wasn't the point. This is too far. This is too much.
Yeah.
But Tyler's no, it's not. But, thinking about how your depression, it gets out of control and you can't control it anymore, which is literally, this is all kind of a byproduct of his depression and anxiety. So it's oh, this is bigger than me. I can't control it. But it's think about some of the other themes that are like lightly touched on in the movie that I think tie to this, the idea of creating something. Cause like, I was watching it with my girlfriend last night, and she pointed out something that I never thought about. And it was the scene whenever he first cries, whenever he meets Bob, and like, you know, his face is in his chest, and he pulls back and he sees like the tear streaked face, you know, like the print on her or whatever. She's like, oh, that's like whenever sorry, I don't know my theology that much, but whenever like I guess the woman gave Jesus and he put it in and made a perfect imprint of his face in the Bible or something like that. And it's like, and you know, and that was right after that line when he said, hung between those tits, the way you'd think of God's is big, you know. and then you know, and then tie that back in to that scene you talked about, which is one of my favorite scenes. Okay, I love every scene in the film, but yeah, so it's one of my favorite scenes. But the chemical burn scene you mentioned, you know, that whole bit of there's a lot of like, you know, guided meditation and, you know, like overcoming pain. But look at that whole thing. He's like, you know, you have to accept that God doesn't want you. In all probability, he hates you. We are his unwanted children. And there's this whole idea of man versus God that is really thick in the film, and this like commentary. And I'm not even going to say like I fully want to commit to what it's saying, but this idea of religion, but I'm going to say more so like organized groups. Yeah. Whether it's like a mob mentality, or because let's be honest, like, you know, not everything done in the name of every religion has been good. So, you know, it's like, so, and I'm not trying to get into like a whole dissection of that, but
we've already talked about dogma in here. So
there you go. There you go. But it's in the film, you know, like it's talking about how, like, you know, starting something is dangerous, and to say I'm right and you're wrong is very dangerous, and to be like, no, this is the only way. And like Tyler's like, no, this is the way. So it's almost like he becomes this like misguided prophet to him. And that's when he realizes you're wrong and I don't need you. And there's some kind of, again, like taking back ownership of oneself in that. But it's in there with like, you know, the idea of like man versus God, just as much as like man versus father. He's like, if our fathers were our models for God, you know, and our fathers leave, what does that tell you about God? And I'm like, I remember seeing that and like having a conversation with some friends that were pretty religious at the time, and they were like really offended by that. I'm like, that's a really interesting question, though. Yeah. You know, like, you know, if that's what he's saying, I'm like, I'm just saying it's an interesting question. And then like he ends up going, and this whole cult gets created, and the idea of like, or people in large groups that are organized under a singular view can be dangerous. You know, for like, you know, like having a conversation, like, you know, it was like, well, I have this idea, but it's like, you know, oh, okay, great. Let's start a religion. And then all of a sudden it's like, that becomes bigger and out of control. And it's like, maybe somebody said like, that's not what I meant. And that's literally what happens with Project Mayhem, you know, where they're doing things what they think are right in the name of their doctrine or whatever, you know, however you want to phrase it. But like that again, that could have been a movie all in itself, but coupled with every other theme we've talked about, how is that much packed into, I think, 139 minutes? That's ridiculous.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's like all of this is pointing to the fact that this movie is so much deeper. Like if you're just looking at the surface, if you're just looking at the fact that it's like, oh, Brad Pitt and Edward Norton start beating the shit out of each other. Oh, but wait, Brad Pitt is not really real. And it's like, yes, if you're just looking at the surface, this movie is kind of ugly. But if you really take the time to deep down dig in it, you realize that there's so much more going on to it. And what you were saying, it's like I brought up Dogma briefly. It's like it goes back to what Rufus says in that movie, where it's like it's much better to have an idea versus having a belief. Because you can change an idea. Beliefs are a lot harder to change because people die for beliefs. People die for this idea that I'm right and you're wrong, like you said. And to go back to something that you point out earlier in that, where you were saying it's like, well, the reason it spread, the reason Fight Club grew is not necessarily it's because of the fact that it wasn't just because of the fact that people thought that would be fun. It's because there's something missing about those people. There's something missing in their lives that they feel like this can this can fill that void.
And what do people do when they're like that? They'll turn to, maybe like a lifestyle change. It could be diet and exercise, or, it could be turning to a relationship for better or worse.
Right.
It could be turning to therapy, a support group. It could be turning to religion. It could, literally, it literally kind of all of that happens a little bit in here. So it's he doesn't try one thing. He kind of runs the gamut, but it's just punchings for me. So.
Well, and the funny thing is, it's like if you really want to go further with this, it's like this movie is basically a satire, a scathing indictment of the self-help industry.
Exactly, because it doesn't show any of the doctors or the therapists or the workers, even the commentary, which I love. I like all the commentaries on the disc, but the one with I think it's the one with Fincher and Norton and Pitt, and then Helena Bonham Carter comes in through a conference call every once in a while. But when they get to that first one, which is, it's heartbreaking, and I hate that. But when that one guy early on, one of the early groups, he's talking about how he's the testicular cancer group, and he's talking about how his wife left, and then he's like, oh, and she always wanted a kid, and she finally got one with her new husband, and just thank God, I'm so happy for him. And he just starts crying, and you're like. So I remember thinking this is so sad, and then the guy gets up. He's like, we should all please thank Travis for sharing with them. And then everybody cuts over and everybody's like, thank you, Travis. And they're like, I see a lot of courage here. And it's it's almost done in a little bit of a mocking way, and I'm just like, fuck, man, that's so raw and it's just a horrible feeling to think about what that brief character is going through. And then it's kind of fun. And in the commentary, they're talking about, they're like, oh my God, the guys in this group are great. And they you could tell that the way that, Fincher set it up is it was meant to be played for comedy.
Right.
But it's so dark. Just grave dark. It's it doesn't paint any of that in a way. The doctor doesn't really listen to him. He's like, choose some valerian root and you want to see real pain, go to the group. And it's that's almost okay, man, someone's coming and telling you that they're having trouble and you just blow them off, and it's
well, and basically and ultimately what the movie is, I feel like ultimately what the movie is trying to get to is that you really ultimately you're in control of whether you start to feel better or not. It's ultimately up to nobody else but you. You can go to these groups, you can go to doctors, you can go to therapy. That's and that can be an important part of the process, to be sure. I know that from experience for the past 11 years.
No. I'm not asking for help or medication or therapy. I advocate all of that, absolutely. But it's this paints it in sort of a it's almost it's not, but it's a good thing. It's it's really about. So I guess you're trying to are you trying to say it's about giving the power back to yourself?
Yeah.
In a sense, that is a tool that gets you there. Okay. Yeah, I agree with that completely.
Oh yeah. No, and I mean, God, I wouldn't go to therapy for 11 years if I didn't feel like it was helping. But
no. I totally agree.
It's basically this whole idea is that you can't rely on other people to help you feel better. You ultimately have to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And it's as painful as that is, as painful as that journey is, that's all that matters. That's the part that is most important here. And it's that's basically what the narrator is going through.
Yeah. and that's beautiful and human, and it's fucked up because at the end it's he takes the control back, literally taking the reins back is realizing no, the gun's in my hand. It's okay. It's a pretty heavy metaphor, but it's there. Yeah. But man, it's I've talked. Some people are the movie just it didn't work for me, or people like it for. I guess I shouldn't be pretentious and say well, they like it for the wrong reasons, but it's I know some people. I've talked to some people that like it for those reasons that when I first walked out and I was like, oh, that was cool. But then I realized I just can't stop thinking about it. I'm it was cool. And I loved it. And wait, why did we go? That's wrong. Wait, this movie's violence isn't the answer. And then I started kind of analyzing how the movie made me feel and realizing it's this thing's like a onion, man. It's the more that you dig into it, it's like there's so much material there, but it sort of sometimes glazes with this like slick, sexy, superficial feel of it. But but that's exactly, it's calling itself out, like about the idea of like is that what it's supposed to be like, like by presenting this false identity of like, is that what a man's supposed to be like, is this how like I'm supposed to feel? And I still I kind of make fun of myself to a degree, because I told you at the beginning, on my own like 6 or 7 or whatever copies of it. I have a whole wall full of posters of different prints and variations and releases, it's just like a Fight Club wall. And it's like, this movie is all about like rejecting consumerism, and yet here I am like buying all these like product representations of it, and I'm like, yeah, I know, okay, I'm gonna like creatively call that irony, but mostly it's just like well, whatever, I mean, it's like it wins over. My love for the movie outweighs that completely. So.
Oh no, and the thing is, it's like, believe me, I get that as well. I mean, anybody who has a favorite movie, a movie that they just can't get out of their head, is going to succumb to that. And it's like, and it's not fair to say it's succumbing, because of the fact that it's like you're genuinely giving yourself over to a certain. You're giving a part of yourself over to something that you genuinely love, a piece of art that you genuinely love, and you want to, and you want to sort of celebrate that love. And yeah, it's an irony that a movie that is to a certain extent about rejecting consumerism will inspire consumerism. But the fact of the matter is, it's like that's the nature of this particular art form.
Exactly.
It really is.
No, and I. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was thinking like, it's so interesting to me, like that, because very early on when we first started discussing this, we were talking about like how the movie's controversial, because it does have kind of a controversial, not just because of like the themes it brings up, but it's like I remember when it came out, like, it was kind of regarded as like a little dangerous, like, it's like, oh, this is this nihilistic thing that promotes anarchy and violence and like, like anti-establishment. It's like, oh yeah, but there's more. But like, I remember like coming over from college, and I was telling my mom, I was like, I'm in love with this movie. I think it's my favorite movie. And, it was weird because she was super strict when I was growing up, and I wasn't allowed to watch anything. Mm-hmm. I didn't get to see like Nightmare on Elm Street till I was like in college or something, because like I had to sneak off to a friend's house to watch R-rated movies. Yeah. And but it was kind of, she messed up sometimes, because she was like, hey, we had HBO and Cinemax, and I was like, what are you doing? Oh, watching Basic Instinct. Don't go downstairs and watch it at 10 p.m. And I'm like, I'm sneaking down there and watching that now. So like, it didn't completely take. But the point is, she was really strict when I was growing up as far as movies, because she's trying to be a good mom. Good for her, but and protect and everything. But then later, now that once I grew up, she's like, oh yeah, we'll watch anything together. So like, content didn't really matter. I was like, oh, we got to watch this movie. And some people were like, you watch Fight Club with your mom? I'm like, yeah. But I showed it to her, and she told me afterwards, she goes, I'm not gonna lie, for the first 30 minutes, I was really worried about you. This was your favorite movie, but I get it. And because at first, like when it starts playing, you're like, what the hell is going on? And it's like, but it was controversial for that, for like a lot of the themes that we discussed, but like it's kind of got this weird, not controversy, but like there's this weird kind of like stamp on it that I've noticed in the past several years. I'm not saying it just exists in the past several years, but I've noticed it, where like it's become kind of like a joke. Like I've seen like in like meme culture, like I remember seeing this one, where they do those like, whatever, like a label of a person's starter packs, and then it's just a bunch of pictures and everything, and they're like, the Midwestern country fan starter pack, and it's all like, like all this stuff. But then the one they're like, it was like, early 2000s douchebag college boy starter pack, and it was like, and one of them was a Fight Club poster on the wall, and I was like, hey now, but at the same time, I kind of laughed, and I was like, I get it, but it's like it becomes this thing. It's like, oh, you probably like Fight Club, don't you? And I'm like, it's. Yeah, and I'm gonna blame one person for this, and it's Fred Durst. I'm just gonna say it, because I remember in college there was some Limp Bizkit song where he was like, "I've seen Fight Club about 48 times." I'm like, "Fuck you, Fred." Anyway, it's like you now people are gonna make fun of it. Anyway, but it's a, and don't forgive me for, it was a long time ago for knowing the lyrics to a Limp Bizkit song. Let's just pretend I didn't admit that. Anyway, it's but like, it's kind of got this weird stamp of, like you said, it's like, oh, it's like when people like what's your favorite film? I'm almost like, it's Fight Club. I'm like, really? I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna stand by it. Shut up. It's I love it, but it's like, I know why I love it, and I don't care. I'm like, when people, it's something that I love to show to people. Like, I remember I was obsessed with, like, having friends come over, like, you got to watch this movie, and I would just like watch them watch it just to see the reaction. I'm like, do you feel the way I feel about this thing? And it's interesting to me how it kind of has that weird I don't know where that came from, all joking aside. But have you noticed that it kind of has that weird reputation today of like, but I'm like, it should be considered, I think, like a classic,
Oh, absolutely.
No strings attached. I mean, it is to me.
Yeah.
But.
No, and I absolutely think it. I absolutely think it is. I mean, I'm very curious, and the thing is, it's like, as we come up to 20th anniversary of it, because it came out in October.
October 15th, 1999. I can't tell you some people close to me's birthday, but I remember the day it came out.
I'm very curious to see, like, the think pieces that come out about it, and see, oh, hey, 20 years later, what is Fight Club? I have a feeling a lot of people are going to. I feel like a lot of people are just going to look at the surface of it and sort of see, but once you start to peel back the layers and stuff like that, I mean, we haven't even really talked about the filmmaking technique and the filmmaking in general about this movie, which is some of the best that Fincher's ever done.
No, it's so amazingly precise. Like it's like Kubrick levels of control, man. Yeah. Like every shot. And if you look at like the movement of every shot and how it cuts together, and like it's so like mesmerizing. Like it is like it's like, if you just want to watch a masterclass in craft, watch that film, because it's like it's timing, and it's the every performance, and like every little note and beat and mark, and it's like no scene is simple. Not even whenever Tyler's just standing still telling them the rules of Fight Club, the way the camera moves, the cutaways to, like them taking their rings off, and and just like, like first night you have to fight, and then it swooshes by his head, and like all the transition shots, and then some of the most, at the time, innovative use of CG as transitions, between locations and shots. And it's just it's kind of overwhelming, because the movie, oh, by the way, I looked, I was right, 139 minutes, but for 139 minutes it doesn't stop moving. Like you don't really have a chance to breathe until the credits come up, and then it's like and you're just like, what happened? And I love that, like, not like as a filmmaker, as a fan of film, just as an audience member, it's like, it's so invigorating. Like I remember reading an interview right before Panic Room came out, because that was his follow-up in 2001, I think. I could be wrong on that, or two. It was two. It was one. It was two. Was it? 2002. Okay. I'm gonna go with you. Yeah. You know your shit. Anyway, so it's I remember thinking, man, Fincher hadn't done a movie in a minute, and that came out, and I remember him saying that after how many scenes, and I never really stopped and think about it, but like, how many scenes and locations, and it was like hundreds that Fight Club had. He's like, I wanted to do something that was just set in one location. And that's why he literally, he's like, we're in a panic room in a house the whole time. And it's like, and he couldn't even do that simple. Like that was so intricate and complicated, because it's like, he's just so, I mean, like I could sit here and just have a several hour conversation with you just about like his filmography in general, and like how, like I worship the ground that man walks on. I think he's a fucking genius, but his, how, think about the scenes. I remember in the commentary, like, and I pointed this out to my girlfriend last night. I was like, oh, they were drunk in that scene. The scene whenever, they were hitting golf balls. The golf balls, yeah. Yeah, and literally that entire scene is like two shots, I think. Mm-hmm. It's like this whole setup of, so it's like there's all these little micro scenes, or like every time Edward Norton's like at an airport or in an airport bar or a different location. And it's like, you just think about it, it's like, yeah, that was a company move and a setup just for like, what ultimately is like 7 seconds in the film. And it's like, oh man, that had to be a grueling shoot, but it's so precise and controlled, and my God, like it is it's intimidating. It's like, I don't know how you improve on that.
I think Zodiac is his best film.
I'm not going to disagree with you. Fight Club's my favorite, but I'm not going to disagree. If you put a gun to my head, like, and say, what is his best film, I probably would say Zodiac.
Yeah.
Which I watched not recently, but just recently. Yeah, no, it's a powerhouse. Like, and they were just everyone on that film was just kind of like in their prime, and like, and then there's like so many like little things. Like I was talking about how like, not to go on a total tangent here, but like, like the just the little things he peppers in that, are like not random, that are specific and controlled. Like I would catch on repeat viewings, like whenever he says, we're all raised on television to believe one day we'll be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars. And when he says rock stars, he specifically looks at Jared Leto because of 30 Seconds to Mars. And it's just like that little, like, oh, that's clever. Or I can't tell you how many times I freaked out. It was, I don't know how many viewings I was in, but it was really far. And then the scene whenever Lou comes down in the tavern, and he starts beating the shit out of Tyler, and Tyler puts his hand up and tells the narrator like to come back, which is literally like, it's like, which personality? He's like, I got this. You stay over there in the corner. But he's saying against the shadow, and I counted. I think there's 2 shots, but it's very subtle. But the shots where you see Edward Norton when Brad Pitt's getting hit, his head's reacting to the shots. Whether if he gets hit in the chin, his head goes up. If he turns his head to the right. It's just a head move, and it's very subtle, but it's in the background. And it's these little things, and I'm like, I remember when I realized, I go, wait, and I rewound it. I'm like, fuck me, are you kidding me? It's like such specific control of everything in the frame. Yeah. And Jeff Cronin with cinematography is astounding. I just wanted him and Fincher just to keep working together, because like, come on, like everything about that film worked. And it's like, you've got, I mean, like we could go like scene by scene, but like, from just like the compositions of just the little frames and the flashes you see Tyler, to like, the repeating of the idea of the power animal, and then how like Marla infects that. And, and then there's little things that like in the dialogue even that are just like perfect, like nuances in performance, which, the actors maybe like a little bit of Fincher with like, how to get them to deliver that, but it's like almost like a throwaway line, not really a throwaway line, but it kind of grazes over whenever Chloe mentions to the narrator, whenever Marla mentions to the narrator that Chloe died. Yeah. And she's like, Chloe died. And he goes, oh, Chloe. And she goes, yeah, it was the smart decision on her part. And we just glaze over a suicide of a character that was like that whole scene where she's just talking about how she wants to get laid for the last time. Yeah. It's like, it's kind of funny, but it's really just sad. You're like this person that just is like, so, it's like they do it in a crude way, but it's like just really just craving human interaction for the last time. And then you say like, oh, she died. And you're like, oh, she died of her disease. And they're like, oh no, oh, she killed herself. Oh my God. And they just move on past that. It's like, there's just so many tiny details through it. And it is masterclass storytelling that like, and like you said, people may watch it and not, they may like it. You either like it or you don't, or whatever. But I was going to phrase it this way: like it for the wrong reasons, or they don't get certain things, but because it's an onion that you peel back, it's like it definitely falls in that category of like all great art, is not disposable. For you to be like, I watched it once and I don't need to see it again. I'm like, no. This is the epitome of a film that demands rewatch. Again. And it's so surface where you like on the surface where you think, oh, the reason to rewatch it is because now I know what the twist is and the catch these things. It's like that's the least of the reason, because you're going to catch up on all the stuff that you missed because of the twist. Yeah,
I mean, even now, even watching it for this rewatch, I continue to realize things about this movie I didn't realize any of the other previous times I'd seen it. And it's just it really is a shockingly deep experience. I mean, on the surface, I can see why people just look at the surface and go, "Oh my God, that's not a movie anybody needs to see." But it's like, well, maybe you look a little bit past the surface and you'll realize it's not saying the same thing that you think it's saying. And
exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, you're right. I mean, in all great movies, they don't just demand repeat viewings; they reward repeat viewings because you will
Right.
see things in them that you didn't see before, and that's one of the great things. And that's one of the great things about a movie like Fight Club, where, and I have to get a plug right in for the remarkable score by the Dust Brothers. It was one of my
Oh God,
absolutely favorite
yes.
soundtracks of that year.
Yeah,
It
of
was
all time for
so
me, it's
good.
brilliant.
Um, and it just fits exactly perfectly with what what the film is about and how the film is about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is a movie that, I mean, I do look at this movie. It's like I'm so grateful that I was, part of that first generation that saw it and just was flattened by it. And now
Yeah.
I continue to be flattened by it, and for reasons that I didn't even necessarily expect 20 years ago. And that's one of the great things that I've noticed going back to so many of these movies from 20 years ago, where it's like they hold up and they have a degree of storytelling adventure and just precision that it sticks with you.
Yeah. No, it absolutely does. Like, I mean, the more I'm thinking about it, I'm like, God, now I want to go watch it again, like right now, because because I know that I'm going to be rewarded, like you say, catching something different, and like I just started thinking about. I mean, it's not that like I didn't realize, but I'm like I never specifically tried to dissect and think about it. But you were mentioning the Dust Brothers score, which like I'm a huge fan of too. Like I, excuse me, Fincher, like kind of came from like like advertising, but like a music video background.
Yeah.
Like as just directed some of the best music videos of his time, and like the way that score works with how he has the film put together. It almost kind of sometimes plays a little bit like a music video in certain segments. Like it's like the scene where you have to go out and start a fight and lose, or like any of the Project Mayhem montages, or the chemical burn scene and everything. Like that was just I don't know. Like it was this weird kind of amalgamation of or coming to fruition, I guess I should say, of like there were a lot of other directors at the time. I guess what I'm trying to say, where you see and you're like, they tried to make the transition from they were a music video director to like a feature film, and that style didn't work. But Fincher was like, I know when to pull that trick out of the bag,
right.
And it worked. Where it's like you not feel like you're watching a 2.5 hour music video, but it's like every once in a while, it's like it kind of has that music video sensibility, but it works so well, which can be a distracting aesthetic if it's done wrong, to be honest. But yeah, no, it's. Do you remember when that came out on video for the first time? Like, do you remember, like, I remember being, because I was working at Blockbuster at the time, and I remember being I kind of thought it was funny, but I kind of got pissed about it because it was in every video store I went to. Do you remember what genre it was in?
Was it action?
It was an action. Yeah. And I was like, I'll even give you comedy, but definitely at the very least, just do the thing that everything got thrown in drama. But to be like, I'm like, Fight Club in an action section, that's the genre. It's like you're gonna be like wanting to be like, and I'm like, oh, don't get me wrong. I'm like, yeah, sure, give me, I'll take a Point Break or Commando any day of the week. But it's like Fight Club doesn't belong in there. No, it's like they're fighting, they're fighting. Yeah, tell them no. So. But I remember just thinking, like, working at Blockbuster, and I'm like, I'm going to move that. They're like, well, it's mandated by corporate. It has to be in this section. And I'm like, what? Have you watched this? Did anyone watch this movie? Explain to me. Well, they're fighting. That's not an action movie. People are going to rent this, and they're going to be expecting, and they're just going to get pissed off. And I'm going to get mad at them for getting pissed off and not liking it because it's not what they were expecting. But.
Well, before
I remember thinking that was really weird. Sorry, tangent.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Before we wrap up, I will put in a bit. I only have one more thing really to say about the movie before we wrap it up.
Okay.
I, as a projectionist and as somebody who's worked at a movie theater and seen the transition from uh, 35 millimeter projection to digital projection, even
Mm-hmm.
in 2001, the projection booth was not like that, and the projectors were not like that, where you had to change over.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that that many families would be out late at night to watch a kids movie is complete fabrication. But I
Oh yeah.
understand why it's that way for the sake of the joke, which is very funny.
Oh no. You're not wrong. But that was very funny. And honestly, I didn't stop to think about that just because I was kind of wrapped up in the joke. But you're totally right.
I'd like to thank Jacob for joining me on talking about Fight Club. Our conversation actually got cut off there at the end, but we were basically done talking about the movie anyway. But thank you very much, Jacob, for joining me on what was a really great discussion on one of the most controversial films of the year. And I'm looking forward to our next discussions on a couple of 1999 films for Go and Magnolia. So that's it for now for the Sonic Cinema podcast. Uh, Hit us up on patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. Check out the Sonic Cinema podcast page. And coming up, we'll have a few more discussions on 1999 movies. We'll have my annual Dragon Con Trek discussion and more. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good day.